Hello, welcome to the video on computer basics. So this is a part of a series of videos which I'll be talking about different IT topics. So we had a set of videos on IT career tracks, and now we'll have a set of videos on basics of computer, basics of hardware, software. We would not talk specifically in any language because that would be covered any other set of videos where we would be on a particular language like C or PHP. But these are, but with the current topics, what we would be covering is a set of videos only to focus on basics of computers and softwares and IT carriers and things in general. Okay. So let's talk about computer basics today. So I'm going to cover hardware and software basics today. So let me increase the screen size a little bit. Okay. So now, anybody who has even remotely touched a computer or at least have seen a computer probably know. So computer has basic two components. So let's say, let me write. Again, this is sounds very basic, but I might as well write it at least because this is supposed to be basics. So anyway, so computer has two main components, hardware and software. So hardware is the basic computer what you can see, and software you can think what goes inside, which makes the program come alive and make things happen. So none of either of them cannot live with each other, cannot live without each other. So hardware constitutes of main three components. Now I'm not going to go over the details, but hardware main components are three you can think. One is you can say hard disk. So hard disk is a storage area which stores your computers, which store the operating system programs, the compiled code and executables and all these things. So it's a storage area, just like the way you have you have, let's say, closet, or you have shelves and where you store your clothes or your books. So like that, for computers it's a hard disk where the files are stored, the files which are lifeblood of the computer. Then there is memory. So what is memory? Memory is also, you can think it's a kind of another storage where, but it's sometimes it could be used as RAM or other DRAM, but basically it's a memory which they have named like random access memory or dynamic random access memory and that sort of thing. But basically it's you can think it's a temporary storage between hard disk and processor. So let me write the third component, which is the processor. So processor is the sort of brain of the computer. So what you normally know as the Intel chips or something, and then the rest are all really peripherals. You have other chipsets which is responsible for other different things like let's say you have a printer board, you have Ethernet drivers and all that, but those are mostly peripheral. So these are the main three components. So let's say this is the processor, I'm writing it as P. Let's say this is your hard disk, so I'm writing it, drawing it like a shelf. This is hard disk, and this is, let's say, your memory, M. So the way things happen is that the processor reads and writes to, oops, I had extra line here, let me remove that. So processor reads or writes from memory, and the stuff from memory comes from hard disk. So let's say you are writing a program or called hello.exe, let's say, which prints a hello world on the screen. So typically this program would be residing on hard disk, right? So it's some location on hard disk, right? So the moment you type in the command hello.exe on the command line, what happens is this processor tells some other component to load the program into the memory. So it goes to the hard disk, gets the program, loads into the memory, and then the processor reads that program from the memory, does its stuff, and then if it has to store variables or do some manipulation, it interacts with the memory and does its stuff. At a greater detail, you will later on hear processor itself has a little memory on its chipset, but that's a lot more details at this point than what you need to know. So broadly you can think the processor is sort of a brain, and it interacts with hard disk and memory to get the job done. Hard disk and memory both are storage. Memory is temporary storage, hard disk is permanent storage. What that means is that, let's say, if you are running a program which does 1 plus 1 equal to 2, so what will happen is that that program called, let's say, sum.exe. exe stands for executable. So that is sitting on the hard disk because somebody has written the program and then he stored in the hard disk. Now when you type the program here, so what the processor goes and gets the program from the hard disk, loads in the memory, and then here it defines the variables. Let's say it says variable 1 equal to 1. So this variable 1, it will be 1 here, and then let's say, so let's get it more detail, maybe then that will be better for you to understand. So the way this would program, let's say, this sum .exe, it basically takes two variables, variable 1 and variable 2, and then it does a summation variable 2, and then it prints it on the screen, or also it probably saves it as a file called result.txt. Okay, so just to repeat, what the sum.exe does is that it takes the values of, if someone enters value as v1 as 1 and value of v2 as 2, so it takes two inputs from the person, adds that, and creates a file result.txt and saves it in the hard disk again with the result of the summation. So now let's see how this program really happens internally at a very high level. What happens? So when you open the computer and then you try sum, let's say if you want to call sum, then you type in sum from a DOS command prompt. Then you get, let's say, so at that point what it does is the processor goes and then gets the file from the hard disk and loads in the memory. So then, and then it results, it makes it on the screen, it appears v1 equal to 1, and then when you enter 1, then computer stores it, that defines a variable, the processor defines a variable v1 and stores it into the memory, not in the hard disk but memory v1. So v1 gets, let's say you enter 1, so v1 would be assigned as 1, and that is happening at the memory. Then again you enter, and then let's say you put v2 equal to 2, so again it defines another variable and stores into the memory v2 equal to 2. And then when you hit enter, maybe let's say when you enter, it does the sum and prints out and creates the result. So that time when you hit the last enter, what will that do is that processor would go to these variables, take these two variables, bring it back here, and then do the addition. Do the addition meaning it has certain chipset or certain logic in the processor where it does the operations, and then it writes the results in the memory as, let's say, another it defines a variable another internally as v3 to have 2, and then it writes the, and if you are, since you are creating a file result.txt, it will create a file result.txt and save it in the hard disk, and it will take the result v3 equal to 2 and store it into that file. So that's sort of in a high level, hope very high level view of how really the things happen between hard disk, processor, and memory, which are mainly three components. Again, these are the main three components, but there are lots of other components. So I hope that sort of gives you a good idea about hardware. So next time we'll talk about more of software. Thank you.